Yes, we are. We are live.
Thank you, Sid. Appreciate it. All right, I'd like to call our meeting of the February 12th CVTA Finance Committee to order. Appreciate everybody making the meeting today. It's I know a lot of folks have a lot going on in their jurisdiction, so it's completely understandable if folks have to hop off and attend to more urgent matters to serve our citizens. But thank you for being here, albeit remotely, and hopefully we'll have a good conversation. I probably won't take too long, but I think it's going to be some valuable stuff. I'd like to start the meeting by doing a pledge of allegiance, led by our vice chair. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If you notice in the back corner, there's a American flag, but if you would start with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Now we'll go through our certification of quorum. Ms. Scott.
Hi, this is Ms. Fusco filling in for Ms. Scott today. Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Davis. I'm sorry. Did I hear Mr. Davis?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am, present.
Henrico County, Reverend Nelson. Goochland County, Chair Spoonhour.
Here.
New Kent County, Mr. Moyer.
Here.
City of Richmond, Mayor Avula. I see that he is here. And Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Davis.
Here.
Thank you. You do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fusco. We would normally move into our participation from a remote location, but since the governor's order, we were able to participate remotely. I will ask Mr. Gregory if there is anything additional that needs to be stated or proclaimed based on that, or are we just free to move on with our business as intended?
If you would, Mr. Chair, if you'd humor me by noting the nature of the emergency and you've already noticed that the governor has declared a state of emergency per the weather, and it is a snow and ice emergency, so we're all having to be remote. And the purpose of the meeting is to provide for the continuity of operations of the CVTA, the public body, and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. That being said, I believe the holding this meeting by virtual telecommunications means is compliant with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Then it's great news. All right, folks, are there any considerations or amendments to the meeting agenda? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to approval of the December 11th, 2024 meeting minutes. They were provided in the packet. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them. Are there any additions, deletions, or do I have a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Second.
Thank you. Who is the second, please?
I think I might have chimed in.
All right. Thank you. I just want to help go out to for the minutes. All right. So I have a motion and a second. Do I have any discussion? All those in favor of entering the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Hearing none, motion approves. At this time, I'll open the public comment period for folks that have any comments or feedback for the CVTA Finance Committee. Do we have anybody else online, or did we receive any emails, Mr. Parsons? Let's go.
No, sir. No one else has requested the opportunity.
Okay, at that, I will close the public comment period. I don't really have much of a report. Just want to thank actually Mr. Parsons for entertaining some of my questions as chair and questioning why and how we're doing things. And I love the spirit of continuing to the phrase I use all the time is iterate to great. So as we continue to evolve, this meeting is really all about that, about looking at some of the things that we have and how can we improve on those if we need to improve at all. But having that discussion is powerful, and I appreciate Mr. Parsons' ability to drive that conversation. So with that, I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the kind words. We continue to do everything we can to make sure that the CVTA moves forward and serves the residents of the region in the best way possible. I do not have anything additional in an executive director's report other than the topics that are on the agenda. So I'd be happy to move into the financial activities review. That's okay.
That is perfectly outstanding.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen so the public can see. All right, can everybody see that? This is the financial activities report for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2025, the current fiscal year. And this is tax activity reported through January 31st, actually showing October. You can see in the farthest right column, right in the middle of the screen. We continue to see steady income receipts of taxes for both the sales and use tax as well as the local fuels. There is some fluctuation, but if we put this on a graph, on a line chart, I think that line would stay steady to show even maybe a little bit of growth. That may be a visual that will be helpful in the future as we talk about best ways to share financial status. One thing I did want to note, outside of the transfers that are happening every month to our regional fund, GRTC, and localities, at the bottom of the screen, I don't know if I can highlight. Anyway, there is the regional fund, the bottom block there with the dark green bar now shows the interest income every month. And this is relevant to some of our discussion on the working capital reserve. We took the action as an authority to set aside 5.05 million. That light green box at the bottom right of the screen shows now the progress towards achieving the working capital reserve in full. So the top line there shows the 5.05 million allocation that the authority took, and then a sum of the interest income over the first 5 months of the year is 6.3 million to show a current working capital reserve balance of 11.4. Our target is 18 million, so we are already well on our way. The interest income has outperformed what the expectations have been so far this year. If you recall, the original discussion was that it would take roughly 15 months to top off the capital reserve, but if the interest income continues to perform like it is, then we're going to be there well before 15 months. So this will be now a regular item on the finance report showing that status of the working capital reserve, and this is actually a part of, I think, the bigger discussion that's on the agenda later on. So I'd be happy to take any questions on that. Again, this is the first time we're showing it on the finance report. So if there are tweaks or adjustments that would be more helpful in terms of displaying this information, I'm happy to receive that, and we will work to make sure that it's presented in the best way possible. There are footnotes at the bottom. I didn't mention that. That notes the action taken in September of 24 to allocate that initial amount to the working capital reserve and the actions that we're taking. Mr. Chair, that's all I have on the financial activities report.
Great. I was just going to pause for a second to see if there was any other questions, thoughts. I did have oh, I'm sorry. Was there any?
This is Rex Davis. I do have a question about New Kent on their local distributions, they seem to be, I guess, bucking everybody else's trend. When you look at them, I just didn't know if there was a timing issue here with that. You see how it
Yeah.
it goes all the way up to 272,000 for the most recent.
Mr. Davis,
And
what I think is these are 4 months behind. So that actually is probably spending that occurred in June and July, which would be our, of course, peak time, versus the others would have been in March and April. What, Chet, is that what you think, Mr. Parsons?
Actually, the last number there is showing activity from October, reported in
yeah,
January.
that was the reason for the question,
okay.
because the June and July activity is actually lower than the October activity, which is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But I mean, it could be just timing or something else is sloshed in and it's just kind of moving on through the system. But anyway, just something of note. It just seems to be a little bit different when you look at the other localities. They don't seem to be moving in the same sort of rhythm that New Kent's moving there. So, but that I don't have any real concern over it other than just to point it out. So,
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any other questions or observations? I had, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you.
We can't hear you, Mayor.
Very faint.
Doesn't look like you okay.
Maybe is that better? Can I switch?
There you go.
Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
Thanks. Hey, Chet, quick question about, just the timeline for meeting that working capital reserve. I think you said you were originally slated to do it in about 15 months, and now it's looking better. I mean, is it looking like 6 months better? Like, do you have a sense of when we might hit that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mr. Mayor. I think that, I mean, based on the interest income reported, I mean, if we average, I mean, it fluctuates a bit based on the performance of the market, but if we average $1 million a month, then we'll be there in 7 months. So I would guess, just a wild guess would be end of the summer,
Great, helpful.
early
Thank you.
fall. But we'll know more over the next few months to see how the trends go.
That was a great question, Mayor, because it led me perfectly into what I was going to comment on, which was the question to the rest of the committee is, I wonder if there's value in showing another line item of where we expected to be versus our total. I believe that we will be seeing a trend of enhanced transparency into government funds. So if somebody were to look at this and go, wow, you guys are way off your reserve. But if we had a line item that said, well, we expect to be here by this time based on our historical interest, but here's where we really are, and then here's how much we need. But I think I would find that valuable. I wonder if the committee thinks it's worth the effort or not. I'm open to love to have that conversation. Did I make sense in what I was saying, or was I just such a good idea? You're blown away. You're all just
It made great sense.
We are in awe of your leadership, Mr. Chairman.
There you go.
My question is, maybe would that be considered? Would you want to have that considered as a projection?
Yes.
And then, would that fall under gap standards for projection? I mean, I don't see any issue with it. But I just would want to, make sure it's reported. Would that be your thought process, sir?
It would. And I think it's also, yes, because I think right now, at least the story is, and of course, if the story changes, we may want to change, but the story is we're investing well. We're investing the people's money as well. We are being conservative, fiscally conservative, and having reserves, and we're aggressively going after those. And I think that having that number of, hey, we projected out at the time that we implemented this a certain amount of interest each month. However, here's where we're trending. I think it tells a pretty powerful story.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Mr. Parsons, would that be difficult to implement?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. Mr. Carroll had lost his connection, so I was just trying to make sure if he was able
Oh, no
to
problem.
reconnect. Do you mind restating the direction so
Right.
that I can make sure I have that?
Sure. So what we're proposing is we've got such a great story at the moment that the board saw the necessity to have some reserves. We put this year up in a plan to get to those reserves. We can, as Mr. Davis said, we can project out monthly what we thought was going to go in there based on where we were when we implemented this. But then we could report out where we actually are. So the story now is, wow, we are ahead of this, because if somebody just look at the numbers and go, wow, you're several $1 million off of your reserve, are you guys okay with that? Well, yes, we expect that. So can we put on the report, here's where we expected to be at this time, here's where we actually are. And then this way, if the trend changes, then we'll also be able to say, okay, well, this is changing, we may need to move some things around.
Sure, I think that's definitely doable. Is that something that I guess we could talk offline? Do you have an idea of what type of format that report is?
It would be one more box on that, in the bottom box. That's it.
Okay. Understood. Yep.
Easy peasy. Okay. Now that I
Yes, sir.
complicated that, let me see what else I can complicate. All right, Mr. Parsons, are we ready to move on?
Yes. I
Or
can
do
that.
you need, I mean, do we want to wait and see if we get Mr. Carroll back? I'm not going to drive this like I normally drive meetings because I want to make sure we're.
I don't see him yet.
Yeah, I
I'm
would
keeping
just
an eye out.
ask Sid to continue to check the
Do you want to
attendees.
text him the dial-in number so he could dial in via his cell phone? At least we can get his voice.
Yes, I think we can probably do that.
Do we want to recess for 2 minutes while we give Mr. Parsons a chance to do that?
Apologies.
No, you're good. All right, let's take 2 minutes, and we'll get Mr. Carroll back, and he'll owe us even bigger.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we're going to give that a shot. I sent him a link again. Hopefully that's going to help.
Okay, we'll give them a second to sign on. We'll appreciate everybody's patience.
I do have one more question as it relates to the financials while we're waiting.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
we
Thank
should
you, Mr.
probably, I'll probably get yelled at by my attorney if we don't go back into session. So let's do
Oh,
it.
okay. All right. That's fine.
And I don't know, maybe I'll take that up at the end, Mr. Davis, from a procedural perspective.
Understood. It's just a clarification. That's all.
Yeah, sorry. But why don't we do this? Why don't we go back into session? And because I think our next thing is the TAC report. And hopefully Mr. Kevin can join us for the deep conversations we want to have. So at this point at 8:25, or sorry, 9:25 a.m., I will call this back into session. Mr. Parsons, I believe the next item on the agenda is you to review the TAC activities report.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I did want to just highlight briefly the investment report.
Oh, okay, great.
There isn't really a whole lot to report other than, as we just discussed, the interest earnings continue to rise. FY25 over FY24 at the same time. We're seeing 7.1 million in interest earnings for 25 versus 5.1 for 2024. So the investments in the short term continue to perform very, very well. One thing to note, it was provided by our fiscal agent, was that short-term yields have remained high to combat inflation. However, the reduction of rates by 25 basis points by the Fed in December offsets that a bit. So we're continuing to watch how those rates perform, and obviously it's reflected in the investment report.
Okay. Thank you.
I have just a bookkeeping note. I have asked Ms. Fusco to reach out to Mr. Carroll to see if she can help. What I sent him did not work either.
Okay, all right. I'm not sure why I have this feeling, but I believe Mr. Davis might have a question on this line item since we actually haven't moved on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, it was right up the alley here. I just want to, and I think I already know the answer to this. It's just a clarification. The interest income, there is no delay in the interest income reflected in our regional fund on this line item. This is month to month to month, but there's not that delay like there is in the top portion of this for tax receipts. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, sir. That is correct. This shows through the end of December. I believe it just wasn't
Very good.
ready in time to show January, but we should have that very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, anything else regarding the line item A? All right, Mr. Parsons, are we ready to go to line item B, TAC activities report?
Yes, sir. I'm actually going to turn this over to Ms. Smith, who's here to speak on behalf of the TAC.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Smith.
Good morning. I don't really have anything to report because the TAC has not met or subcommittees have not met since the last authority meeting. And then the last report I gave, really our heavy lift had been the update to the regional framework document. And we crossed that goal line. And so our next meeting, we'll be talking about the $5 million in interest earnings set aside for regional projects and talk about candidates for that money. So we've got that on the agenda, and we'll also be talking about CVTA regional. That process starts in the summer. Do you have any questions for me? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Okay, moving on to other business. Let's see, we've got to review the financial reporting requirements. If you don't mind, Mr. Parsons, I'm going to set this up for a minute. So as I came into the finance committee, new eyes on things, and I ask a lot of questions. A couple of things came up that we were questioning, and we wanted to have discussion in this group to figure out how to move forward if we want to move forward. One of the things, and Mr. Parsons will go through, is each I don't know what frequency, but when localities are looking to be reimbursed for their funds, there's a process that we go through. Within that process, and by statute, one of the things that the CVTA is responsible for, it says something to the effect of ensuring that projects are on time. And the only thing that's referenced in that report is a chart when at the very beginning, which highlights several very, very, very detailed items all the way down to community meetings. And those are the only thing that really reflect if a project is on time. So I had asked Mr. Parsons if we could have a conversation regarding how do we fulfill that requirement of ensuring that projects are on some sort of timeline to meet the statute, but also not make it onerous for the localities. We're not looking to be looking over their shoulders, or but the purpose from what I can see is to ensure that the projects are flowing in a way that we will always be able to fund when necessary, so that we don't become a backlog, especially for dollars. So ask Mr. Parsons to have that conversation. And then the other, and I'll just say this now before we go into it, but after the last meeting, we had talked about the reserve funds. And I had asked, like, do we have a policy to actually access the reserve funds? So we have the money there, but do we know when we're able to tap into it? So we just wanted to have that discussion today as well. So see this as, again, twice now I'm going to use this, the iterate to great and the evolution of the CVTA. So thrilled to be part of this and some small part of the launching of this. So Mr. Parsons, hopefully I didn't steal too much of your thunder, and I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to let you pick up all the slack if you'd prefer. But
Nobody in the region wants that, buddy.
What we have in front of us today, and I've shared on the screen, is kind of an overview. This is a new activity. We haven't had this type of dive into really checking our financial reporting requirements to make sure that all the rules that are actually written down and either adopted by the CVTA or set up in the state code are actually being implemented as intended. So I really appreciated this opportunity to go back in and take a look at everything that we've got on the books to make sure that we're getting the best and latest information to the authority for your information. So what I sent out, I believe I sent this out yesterday. I apologize for the lateness, but it's also on the screen now. It's kind of an overview of where we are in terms of what our financial policies and procedures tell us, and then what the requirements are. And I took the opportunity to split it into our 3 pots. So locality requirements, GRTC requirements, and then CVTA requirements. So that matches the 3 different funding streams that we follow. The first thing at the top of the screen is a link to our currently adopted financial policies and procedures. So that's a reference item. And then just the same, the legislation as amended. So that was originally House Bill 1541 back in 2020. It has been adjusted slightly to increase the membership over time. But those are kind of our 2 base documents to understand where this discussion is stemming from. So the first thing that I did was go over 4 goals that are currently my goals on the staff side. I think everyone's had the chance to meet her, but Planner RVA just hired a chief finance administration officer, and that hire was really a good checkpoint for me to make sure that person is fully on board with the activities of the CVTA and any requests, especially that this committee might have in terms of how we provide information back to the Finance Committee as well as the full authority. So I set up as part of her onboarding and understanding of what the CVTA needs are. Her name's Lauren Shepard, by the way. I sat down with her and went over some of the goals. So the current goal 1 that's listed there is that we are going to be working together to do a detailed review of the financial policies and procedures. What I'm talking with you today about is more of a high level, just understanding of some of the bullet points. But I'm going to be working with her over the next few months to kind of take a deeper dive and understand what the requirements are, if there are any adjustments that may be necessary to the policies, and then working with Mr. Gregory to make sure we get that on the table for the committee to consider. Current goal number 2 is that I have asked her to meet directly with Mr. Spoonhour, Mr. Moyer, in your roles as chair and vice chair of the Finance Committee, to just understand your goals, your expectations for the remainder of this fiscal year, and any high level vision you might have for the Finance Committee in particular as we move into the future. And it really is kind of I assume she hasn't reached out yet, but following today's discussion, I think that'll be a good teeing up of topics that we may want to consider in terms of monthly and quarterly reporting, and then the expectations that you all have for how that is shared with the committee. Current goal 3 is that we will share financial standing of the particularly the administrative and operating budget on a monthly basis. That is not something that is currently, I don't believe currently the information that is communicated to the full committee. We do, I work directly with Planner RVA to prepare the monthly invoices that cover all the expenses and the reimbursables, the invoices that come back to CVTA for things like meeting expenses, travel, member stipends, contractor invoices, those types of things that are all reflected in the budget. But just a better reporting out to the Finance Committee of what those expenses are and what the expectations are for the remainder of the fiscal year. And then finally, this is a somewhat specific requirement that is listed, but current goal 4 is to develop an update on the following code requirement, and this is directly from the state code that was adopted back in 2020. No locality embraced by the authority shall reduce its local funding for public transit by more than 50% of what it appropriated as of July 1st, 2019. So basically, a reduction of more than 50% prior to the CVTA being in existence and providing that 15% the CVTA monthly commitment to GRTC. So at this point, there's probably some locality tracking, but in terms of the CVTA, we don't have a good indication of where those funding commitments are among the localities that support public transit. So I've asked her to work with staff to take a look at what the best way to report that out in the future. And I mean, the initial thought was that's something that would be in, the annual budgets, and it's going to require some research. But I think that working with our locality members and understanding what that commitment has been since 2020 and how it's changed will be a good indicator. The goal here is not to dig into locality business. It's to make sure that CVTA is following the requirements that we were ordered to follow in the establishment of the agency. So just to make sure that we're above that 50% to keep us safe and hopefully avoid any action that might be forthcoming. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take questions as they arise. I could just keep plugging away through this, whatever your preference may
Let's
be.
just pause here and see if there's any questions on this one specifically. No. So I'll just make two comments then. So first, this is okay. Was that Mr. Gregory?
I'm sorry. Pardon me.
Oh, that's okay. So one, again, just want to give Mr. Parsons some attaboys. I asked him to look at one thing. He says, you know what? We should probably look at it all. So Mr. Parsons, you can continue to one-up me all day long. So nice job. I did have a question, though, regarding number 4 that you highlighted. While I understand that it's in our documentation, do we believe that the mandate from the General Assembly was for us to monitor what the localities are doing? Or is that, I don't read anything in here that says that it's the responsibility of the CVTA to ensure that these are accounted for. What makes us believe that it is our job to make sure the localities are living up to this 50%?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll say a short thing, and then I'll defer to Mr. Gregory to see if there's any exact legal advice. But I think that the way I look at it, this is similar to providing the 50% distribution back to the localities. That process has a certification where localities need to ensure that those 50% CVTA locality funds are being used for transportation purposes. CVTA doesn't have a mechanism or a requirement to know exactly what those purposes are, but we ask for the assurance from the locality members that it's being used for the right thing. So I just took that kind of oversight's not the right word, but
Similar approach.
Yeah, similar approach for the transit funding. But you're right. It may not be. There may not be a mechanism there, and that's fine as well. It just be.
Yep.
I don't want to. I don't want any short steps to be our fault.
No, I think that's excellent. Any comments on that before I continue to blabber?
Mr. Chair, if I may just add,
please.
just to supplement Mr. Parsons, when the CVTA was originally promulgated and established, and we were going through those how is this thing going to work kind of questions, and the concern was that the CVTA had a responsibility under the statute to comply with its requirements and to see that the funds were spent for the purposes intended under the law. And so but the CVTA is somewhat at a disadvantage because, once those funds are out the door, the compliance is on the duty is upon the recipients of the funds, the GRTC, the localities. And so the thinking was there has to be some way to demonstrate compliance and to request that the bodies that receive the funds demonstrate and certify their compliance so that the CVTA can then say, look, we have this mechanism that where they certify and they are in compliance and they've done what is required under the statute. So there's a circle, there's a process and circle of compliance there that we can demonstrate to the public and to the General Assembly and to the board and to whomever else, and to the auditors, so we can demonstrate that. So it's just a matter of prudent use of public funds and to comply with the statute. So that was kind of the thinking there. If that would answer your question, thank you.
Okay. Any thoughts from the committee on it?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm putting in a different context. The only transit we have, of course, in New Kent is Bay Transit, and we fund that 100%. So if we decided to fund it at 40%, we would not be compliant, even though that's not CVTA money at all. But I think that's what it's talking about is local funding for public transit, meaning funding that's outside of CVTA. If that would be dropped below 50%, that would be a violation of it.
Okay.
Nothing to do with CVTA funds.
Well, and I'll just take privilege here. I kind of think that if I'm trying to think why this was put in place, I kind of believe it was for the intention of, okay, well now, yeah, percentage of this new money for localities that do provide, let's say for Henrico, for example, they're going to have monies from CVTA that are going into GRTC to ensure that they don't say, well, okay, well, that's our funding then. Right. And then let's say that winds up to being 25% of what they normally did. This is saying, well, no, you've got to make up the other 25%. This isn't all that you get to provide. You still have to provide. So this was a way that if CVTA didn't bring in the funds to meet where we were when we launched, it sort of protected that. Mm-hmm. I guess it comes down to this board, especially the larger localities, especially those that I think that are in the GRTC. Is this something that we believe that we should be monitoring? And I think Mr. Gregory brings up a great point. And I think Mr. Moore, you as well. I don't even really know if Gloucester County, I don't think provides anything towards public transit. So
I don't know how we'd monitor.
50% of zero is zero.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think the key point in this paragraph, though, is July of 2019. So what was the commitment at that point? Mm-hmm. And I mean, New Kent may have had different practices 5 mm-hmm. years ago, right? So I think it was safeguarding a commitment in general to public transportation,
right? So
that the funds were not reduced somehow, that the commitment was there, and that, right. that the requirement in the code is you got to keep that commitment, even with the new source of revenue.
Right. So is there a request or a recommendation, Mr. Parsons? Is this to send a TAC to develop a process? Is it?
No, sir. At this point, this is just discussion of Finance Committee. I don't think I'm prepared to do anything other than I will make sure to continue to look at this and maybe work with Mr. Gregory to understand if there are any additional steps that may be worthwhile to take in regards to taking any additional actions.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I finally got back in the meeting.
Hey, welcome back.
Hey. Don't even get me started on all that, but what section are we discussing here?
So we're talking about Mr. Parsons. We're in new business, the first line item. Mr. Parsons is discussing so to catch up, Mr. Carroll, I had asked Mr. Parsons to look at a piece of our process where we had to ensure, based on what the General Assembly said, we had to ensure projects were on time. We don't really have a way to do that. So I'd asked Mr. Parsons to look into that. Mr. Parsons expanded that to look at all of the commitments that we have and do we have the right processes in place. So within that, he part of his work there, he stated our goals. And one of the goals is to ensure, and you can see it on the screen now, hopefully, that one of the things that was asked was that that localities don't spend less than 50% on public transit just because the CVTA is there. That's probably the easiest way to surmise that. We're talking about, it's just a discussion point at this time of, is this something we need to address? And just what are our thoughts about it?
Okay, well, I'm looking at my document and that I downloaded, and it doesn't have section 4. It goes as far as 3. So I don't even have what you're looking at there.
Do you see it on the screen?
I do.
Okay, yeah.
Give me 1 second if I can zoom in to read it here.
Let me, while he's reading that, I guess my question is, Chet, do we even have the authority to make any adjustments to this document without the approval of the General Assembly as it relates to commitments to numbers?
Reverend Nelson, this is Eric Gregory. I'll take the liberty, if Chess doesn't mind, of trying to answer that question. No, this is language directly from the statute. So if that were to be changed, it would have to go through the General Assembly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. And I'll take a moment just to, while Mr. Carroll's reading over that. I don't know if what I addressed earlier answered the question appropriately. That is a good question as to how do you ensure compliance with these requirements. The CVTA has oversight capability, but it doesn't have enforcement authority necessarily, other than to require reporting, I would suggest. So that's a good question. I'm not sure how that would come to the fore. Yeah, I think it would require somebody would have to bring this up, whether it would do some allegation of noncompliance, but I'm not sure if the CVTA would police that or not. We'd have to discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Okay, so I'm reading what it says, and if that's directly from the code, I think it's pretty, I mean, Mr. Gregory may disagree, but I think it's pretty clear that the locality is required to adjust annually the monies that they allocate for public transit based on the increase in the consumer price index and all urban consumers. So that falls on the locality. I don't know.
So you're right.
CVTA
And the question is it the CVTA's responsibility to police that? I think that's the question on the table right now.
And I don't think that, and I have to read the whole statute,
Sure.
but if it's not in there, the only thing the CVTA could agree to do if we did a bylaws change to do that, but there's nothing on the authority that I see from this one paragraph that gives us the authority to do it. Mr. Gregory may have more information from the code. I'm going to pull the code up on my other computer and look at it as well, but I'm sorry it took me a little bit to get back.
No, we're completely understandable. Glad you could. I think for now, I think we've accomplished our mission of just bringing this to light and just having a cursory conversation about it. No decisions are being made, but just something for awareness. So I think we're right where we need to be. All right, Mr. Parsons, want to move on to the next item?
Yes, sir. Is that moving for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So the next section is basically based on our three pillars of revenue distribution. What are the requirements for reporting? There's lot more information in the financial policies, but this is the focus for today. So the first one, locality reporting, there's two pieces. And again, I pulled these directly from the financial policies and procedures. Each jurisdiction is required to provide the Finance Committee a quarterly report on expenditures and must provide CVTA an annual certification of expenditures by September 15th each year in the format required by the authority. If the report is not received by September 15th, transfers of the current fiscal year will cease until the certification is submitted in acceptable form. I put the words in green because we are good. This is the current practice and has been followed by everyone. There has not been a situation where the certification was not submitted in an acceptable form. I think the only thing to be aware of is I believe that September 15th has worked for everyone. We had in the first few years asked for certifications in July and August, and that just did not fit into the schedules for some of the member localities. But I believe September 15th has worked. That can be adjusted if needed, but at this point, the authority is operating correctly in following this rule. The second item, locality 1B, is the requirements in the standard project agreements. So part of that language in the legal executed agreement between locality and CVTA, or VDOT and CVTA, is that the locality is required to submit quarterly progress and expenditure reports and invoices with supporting documentation to the CVTA in the form prescribed by the CVTA. This supporting documentation shall include copies of vendor and contractor invoices paid by the locality, an up-to-date project summary and schedule, and a cash flow summary of all payment requests, payments, and adjustments in a form prescribed by the CVTA. So splitting this into two parts. Invoices that come with reimbursement requests are currently being submitted with I'm sorry, the reimbursement requests do include invoices from contractors and vendors that are being paid by the locality. That is the bulk of reimbursement requests, are including all of those invoices and paperwork. What we are not doing right now is the second part. So quarterly reports are not currently being submitted for projects that are operating under a SPA, and that supporting documentation is not included because those reports are not in place. Things like the project summary, schedule, revised schedules, and a consistently formatted cash flow summary would be helpful for CVTA record keeping and transparency. So that is currently not in the workflows for reimbursement requests or regular practice for any locality that is currently operating under a SPA with the CVTA. So that would be a staff recommendation, is to put that into process. I think there is still some work to do in terms of defining what that reporting specifically includes and the format for those quarterly reports. But at this point, this is what the research shows.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons. Any thoughts?
Mr. Chair, just in terms of overall process and response to this, will this all go back to TAC at some point so they can sort of work out details and recommendations for next steps and then come back to the full board? Is that what you envision happening?
What I envision is us discussing today to figure out how do we close this gap.
Yeah. Okay.
And honestly, that, not that, I have a crystal ball, but I'm thinking that TAC does the lion's share of the process building and the work, that's probably where it will land.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my approach would be to work with Ms. Smith and the rest of the TAC to define what that reporting format entails, and then probably bring that back to the Finance Committee following TAC development. I mean, they're the ones that are working directly with the contractors already. So any revisions in project schedule, that I think that may have been the impetus for this entire discussion was, are we meeting the schedules or not? And all those project details that we would be interested in would be coming from TAC anyway. So that's a natural next step.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, and maybe to just start this conversation, I'm very sensitive to the amount of, now, this is a balance, right? You know, we're getting millions of dollars for transportation funding. So yes, there's some onus on us and we should do what we need to get that. But if you add our TPO, Plan RVA, we require a lot of our localities. And my preference would be to make this as least onersome on the localities to meet the requirement. You know, and as can we instruct the TAC to try to find a way that does not create a hardship for them and fulfills this requirement? You know, so I don't know if there's value in sending, you know, 100 pages a quarter for every project. You know, we have got 100 projects, you know, and the reality of anybody reviewing that, or is there a better, like, hey, by sending this, you acknowledge that your project is on time. Again, I'm not trying to come up with the answer, but you know, shoveling us thousands of pages of documentation every quarter, I don't believe helps anybody other than to check a box. But that's just.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. I feel like we could probably solve a lot of the reporting requirements with a simple spreadsheet dashboard that's just like green, red, yellow, and then, you know, the comments fill in some more detail. But yeah, none of us will get into the detail on all of those projects for sure.
So any other comments for Mr. Parsons? Any concerns for what I just said, Chet?
No, sir. I think that my intention is not to create any new work. The information that we're looking for as part of the policy here is that it should all be at hand already. But I think it does play an important role in making sure that we're committing to and distributing funds in the most responsible way possible. Because, you know, if the I-64 GAP project is 6 months ahead of schedule, it would be really helpful to know that, because then we'll have additional funds to free up to commit to another regional need earlier than we anticipated. So I think all these puzzle pieces coming together would be helpful. I mean, it's just more information for us to have to make better decisions.
Yep.
I think we're all on the same page.
All right, great. Any other comments before we move on? All right, thank you.
Okay, so the next one is GRTC. 2 points here as well. First one is GRTC shall develop a plan for regional public transportation within Planning District 15 in collaboration with the Richmond Regional TPO in conformance with the guidelines required by 33-286. The GRTC shall annually provide to the authority sufficient documentation as required, showing that the revenues distributed under subdivision were applied in accordance with the authority approval and the guidelines required. So what the current practice is that the GRTC Regional Public Transportation Plan is, at this point, is shared as a presentation with the CVTA, and it typically happens late spring, early summer. I did, in the document that was shared, I believe I linked. Yes, there's a link to that, the most recent plan that was shared by GRTC. So that is the work that is currently being done. I just happened to tune into the TAC meeting earlier this week for the TPO. And that was where GRTC was collaborating with the TPO TAC on what that regional transportation plan would include for this coming year. So the work is being done. So I think we're meeting those requirements. So I obviously there could be some massaging done to the process, but in terms of what the policies say and what is being done, we're checking the boxes. The next item is requiring quarterly reports from GRTC. Those are that practice is currently being followed. And yes, this is also covering the GRTC certification. I believe we discussed this at our last full authority meeting. GRTC operates on a different fiscal year. So we just in January approved their annual certification from the past fiscal year. So given that slight adjustment in reporting timeline, we are meeting these requirements as well. So moving on to the last section here in terms of CVTA requirements. The first one is dealing with the working capital reserve. This is the newest section of the financial policies and procedures. We are required to fund and maintain at least 3 months of the budgeted annual CVTA funds. If you recall the financial report, that was $18 million was the number that was developed following the FY24 budget. We will revisit this level, the level of this reserve no later than June 30th of this year to update as needed for any updated projections that might be out there. Those reporting tools are included in the current monthly financial report. So we're meeting those requirements. The next item 3B is written request for supplemental project funding shall be submitted to the executive director for review, where that person would present a recommendation to the finance committee before you all make any recommendation to the authority. This option has actually been supplemented recently in the revised project selection and allocation framework on behalf of the TAC. To date, there have been no requests outside of the regular regional project application cycle. And just for everyone's reference, that is now every 2 years for all of the CVTA regional funding. And we'll start up again this coming July. Item 3C is a requirement for the executive director to advise any recipient in writing of any potentially non-compliant uses of funding, which would be this is tied to that certification that everyone does on an annual basis. To date, there has been no improper use of funds identified or reported, but that policy is there when needed. And then finally, 3D, the executive director will provide the finance committee with quarterly reports on the status of funding for regional projects and will report the same to the authority at least annually or as otherwise needed. This reporting is not in place, but at this point, I don't have the capability of preparing that report because we don't have these quarterly reports that would be part of the SPA. The information contained there would help me understand the performance of the regional funding so that we can better provide an all-inclusive summary of action regarding the 35% tax revenues. Mr. Chair, that's the end of this report. If there are any questions, be happy to take that. Otherwise, I can move into the next one.
Any questions? I guess my one question is, who ensures that we are compliant? Maybe that's a Mr. Gregory question. So obviously we ensure the localities. The General Assembly said we've got to make sure these things happen. Who's checking us?
You do. I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. I'm without power here, so I'm working on cell service. So yeah, that's the duty of the board to ensure that the body is compliant with the statute. That is your responsibility. And so if there's a problem, then that's a problem. But you know, and then the higher authority would be the General Assembly. But it is up to the board to ensure.
But at this time, we don't report out on an annual basis. Like, here's the things you've asked us to do. Here's what, and I'm not recommending we do that, but I'm just trying to understand.
But no, I mean, as a public body, just like Goochland County, for instance, Goochland County has a responsibility to ensure that it complies with the laws, that it has a duty to comply with. And the checks and balances are the voters, your constituents, and your annual auditors, and the transparency which you are required to provide. So that's the same kinds of constructs apply to the CVTA and other public bodies.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Gregory.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting because in that sense, and Mr. Gregory, I believe, is absolutely right. But from that standpoint, we have legislative requirements. We are self-governing within the parameters of the statutes, right? The statutory requirements. But on top of that, we have audits. But I don't know that we're any different than any other board or commission that we sit on, whether it's back home or somewhere else. We do our audits. We open that up, obviously, to the public. And so I think in that vein, we're like any other statutorily formed agency. We meet the standards, the daily operations, the reporting, and the fiscal responsibilities are left to us and hopefully our good judgment.
Thank you, sir. All right, great. All right, Mr. Parsons, I want to move on to the last, I think it's our last item for discussion.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Carroll.
So my internet went out at the house, so I had to switch over to a mobile hotspot. So I'm back again, and we'll see how long that lasts.
Well, welcome back, Mr. Carroll.
What was the last point we just went over?
So I had asked the question, so Mr. Parsons went through the list of requirements by statute and where we are in compliance, so to speak, and where we're working to get into compliance. And my question was, who ensures that the CVTA is in compliance? And Mr. Gregory and Mr. Davis kind of weighed in and said, you know, as a governing body, we are self-reported, we have audits, but there's no, like, we have to go to the General Assembly, commit some subcommittee meeting every year and provide information. So it's more of a self-governing with obviously the guidelines that have been provided.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And also, you know, also refer to the bylaws that were established by the CVTA, which are authorized for us to have under the actual code. And so I would agree with that. Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Any other questions before we move on? Comments? All right, Mr. Parsons.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Looks like we're losing Mr. Parsons. Can everybody hear me? Looks like I can see it.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Gotcha.
Okay. Well, let me see if I can pick this up until Mr. Parsons unfreezes, pun intended. So again, after the meeting the last CVTA meeting, the question I raised was, do we have a process now that we're getting reserve funds? Do we have a policy or a process that talks about or explains when we would tap into the funds that we are holding back? And the sort of, it was a good question, which I was glad it was a good question, not a bad one. But so we wanted to bring it to this body to say, hey, this seems to be something we need to evolve. And my recommendation would be to have the TAC ask. Now, again, I don't know if we have to go to the full committee to ask the TAC to look at something, but to look at what would our policy be in order to access those funds, so that we know for our board and for future boards, here's these dollars, and here's how and when we access them.
Mr. Chair, I think that the Finance Committee could refer this back to the TAC and ask them to provide input, in which time they report back to us, we evaluate it, and then if we choose to agree with what the input is, we can then vote to forward it to the full committee for consideration. But we have the ability to assign tasks from the Finance Committee in that manner, unless Mr. Gregory thinks differently.
I concur with that, Mr. Chairman.
And you surly vets that you are, would that be just done as a consensus, or do we need to take a vote on that? Or we just,
Well, I think we can make a motion to refer it to the TAC for study. I would make that motion and have no problem with it.
okay, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion passes. We will be referring this to the TAC. All right, so moving right along, and see. All right, so we are on to CVTA Finance Committee member comments. Anything that that you'd like to bring in front of the body based on any thoughts you might have or what's going on in your jurisdiction?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would say as a former comment after my struggles with Zoom today is I think Microsoft Teams works better. In my personal opinion. And I think that we should make sure we explore what type of platforms, if this happens again, that we could use besides just Zoom.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Parsons is back with his hand raised.
I apologize. Could you bring me up to speed on what the last action item was?
Yes, we tripled your workload and cut your pay in half. No, we so I did a less than Parsons-like job explaining what we're looking to do, which was create a process by and standard and policy by which we would govern us and when we would be accessing those reserve funds. We just took a vote to refer that to the TAC to review, and it passed unanimously.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Who knew that me being in a fourth world country would have better internet access and stability than our folks in Central Virginia? Okay. Any other member comments? Okay. I'll just say before I adjourn, I just appreciate everybody's efforts, and I understand we've had technical issues, but years past we would not have even been able to meet, and now this frees us up in case next month something else comes up. So we got some good work out of the way. We've got I think we did some great work, and I appreciate everybody's effort in making that happen. So at that, I will adjourn us at 10:16 a.m. Thank you. We are adjourned.